Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes you have to ask yourself the question, at what point does Cyril sit back and say to himself, the things I've done to degrade the country are actually starting to affect me? And this is the news that Cyril Ramaphosa has been spotted queuing in London in order to fly back to South Africa. Now, he's been forced to queue in London for a commercial air flight because his own presidential plane is under maintenance. But before we get on to the main video of today, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It really does help. Now, what you're actually finding here is that the president's plane that's under maintenance, apparently it's under maintenance because of a long line of technical failures. And I'm sure you can guess the reason that there's technical failures on the plane is because, one, the plane is old, and two, well, nobody's actually maintained it. Now, many individuals are noticing that what we're actually seeing here is broader governmental incompetence, with the presidency unable to maintain even his own aircraft. I mean, what chance do you have of him maintaining Eskom or PRASA, the trains, the railway networks, if he cannot even maintain his own mode of travel? So now the president's got to travel economy style. I mean, obviously he wasn't economy. But what it does mean is that it shows you why our economy is faltering when the cabinet ministers themselves usually live lavish lifestyles and they can't even maintain that. So if they cannot even maintain their own standards, what chance is there of them maintaining yours or mine? Now, in other news, and I've got to say I read this news article, and it's really a follow-on from the news article I did yesterday, and this was around the news that many Africans were being drafted into the Russian-Ukraine war with promises of citizenship and payment from the Russian side. Well, news out today is that dozens of MK party members, that's Jacob Zuma supporters, are reportedly stuck on the Russian front lines after being lured by a VIP protection training scheme. Now, they were told that they would get VIP protection training in Russia. I'm not really sure who the VIP protection was for. Maybe it was just a job deployment opportunity. They could come back and, I don't know, get a job as a VIP protection person for an ANC cadre. Who knows? Instead, they were shipped off to fight in the Ukrainian war. Now, relatives of those individuals are now pleading with the South African government to help bring them home. But this is going to cause a problem because South Africa and Russia are kind of allies. And so the only way to get them home would be to side against Russia and call diplomatic fouls. I can't see that happening. So this is actually starting to cause a bit of a diplomatic issue. Now, the scandal exposes the growing Russia-MK political connection and South Africa's ambiguous stance in the war. Because, well, the MK party sent off its own people to go to Russia to get training from them. They landed up on the front line. But many of those individuals are now noticing what the reality of the local policy, the political policy of those parties, what they actually lead to. What they lead to is, well, they're fighting a big bloody battle in Ukraine that they never thought they were going to have to fight. The entire thing underscores Pretoria's failure to protect its own citizens abroad, as the ANC struggles to manage the MK splinter group's military image, because that's effectively why they were going there, right? They were going there to get military training, because remember they're the military arm. But this is dumb. The entire thing is stupid, because what it's effectively showing is the MK members and ANC members that you cannot trust your own political party. Now, turning to the G20, as you know, there is currently a large amount of G20 fallout, specifically because of Donald Trump's snub. And this is Donald Trump's snub, where he says that he will be boycotting the Johannesburg G20 summit, and this is sending ripple effects worldwide, with many individuals asking the fundamental question. Without the involvement of the US in the G20, effectively making it the G19, does the summit still hold legitimacy? Now, a South African columnist notes the ironies that the Afrikaner disciples of Trump, as they call it, this is Propaganda 24, by the way, suggests that these Afrikaners see Trump as a savior of Western conservatism, but now feel abandoned because he's not going to be in the country, effectively fighting their corner. But I don't really think that's true, because the whole point of Trump not coming is to stand in solidarity with the Afrikaners, as you know. But his absence does leave populist movements without their symbolic figurehead at a time when they seek global validation, because that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to get a large amount of these populist individuals. They're all going to stand there pointing a finger at Trump, saying, you're terrible, you're horrible, look at all your isolationist type tactics. And he's not going to be there. So they're not really going to be able to pick on him. And so some individuals are now saying, with the US no-show, does this effectively weaken the legitimacy of the forum? Or does the legitimacy remain intact? Any agreements that they have, well, how worthwhile are they going to be without the world's largest economy? Now, South Africa is emerging as the key facilitator for alternative power blocks, that's BRICS, China, and Russia, because it's trying to position itself as a diplomatic bridge rather than a Western ally. So this is what South Africa is trying to say. They're trying to say, well, we're a neutral, non-aligned party. We can be the facilitator between the West and the East. We can trade with both sides. But you see, the problem is South Africa is really rubbish at doing this. They cannot seem to get the position right, leading the West to think, well, you're not really non-aligned. You're actually more aligned to the East in communist ideology, no lies detected. And so effectively, we cannot use you in this facilitatory type role because you don't have the integrity for it. Now, this is causing South Africa problems because in effect, with the US exclusion from the G20, that's exactly what it's saying. It's effectively saying South Africa wants to be this arbitrator between the West and the East, but the West doesn't see South Africa as being credible. Now, Trump's absence is raising doubt about the future of the G20's effectiveness in managing global crises amid polarization, with many individuals saying that the next G20 is likely to be in 2026, it's going to be in America. What's the chances that individuals will all go there? And so effectively what this is leading to is, well, it's leading to a complete collapse in the legitimacy of the Gs. Now, onto other news, because we've just been talking about Russia and Ukraine. Well, the Ukrainian ambassador in Pretoria is on a public relations offensive, trying to win allies in Africa, because they see that Africa is effectively going through to Russia and China. Now, a Ukrainian diplomat is attempting to highlight Ukraine's shared struggle for sovereignty while subtly criticizing Pretoria's pro-Russian stance. And what they're effectively trying to say is they do not understand why parties such as the ANC side with what they're classing as a colonizer when those individuals have been through colonial histories themselves. So effectively, they're suggesting that they themselves are part of the struggle type class. Why would Africa not want to side with them given their history? Now, South Africa attempts to say that it is neutral, but as you know, it does tilt towards Moscow. And this is complicating the entire offensive of Ukraine, because effectively Ukraine is now in the process of trying to get other African countries on side. It is itself isolating South Africa. But the story does capture a broader geopolitical tug of war. Ukraine is trying to sway the global south even as Russia deepens ties with its BRICS nations. But will this backfire for BRICS nations? Because the story of Ukraine being a struggle victim against colonialism is one that will resonate in Africa. And so there is a big risk that South Africa itself, in attempting to position itself as the leader of the global south, may find itself isolated if Ukraine gets its own way in terms of its own polemic. Now, moving on to a very interesting story, and it's really an interesting story if you have any connections to Blighty. And this is the news story that for the longest time, South Africa was the largest source of remittances to Zimbabwe. But that's changing. So what this effectively was many Zimbabweans coming to South Africa, earning a wage and sending the money back to Zimbabwe. We all know that this occurred. Now, with economic stagnation, job losses, and tightening immigration enforcement, well, this has slashed the amount of money that is now leaving South Africa going back to Zimbabwe. Now, who do you think is taking up the slack? Well, actually, it's the United Kingdom, because the United Kingdom is now showing that Zimbabwe's diaspora are now diversifying away from South Africa due to South Africa's economic stagnation, and they're effectively moving to the UK in large numbers and sending the money in terms of pounds back to Zimbabwe. Now, the reason that this is important is because this again shows that South Africa is no longer the region's economic engine. Even the Zimbabweans are deserting South Africa. Now, one of the main reasons for economic stagnation in South Africa is Black economic empowerment, also known as BEE. But in a new news article, it has been suggested that BEE was not invented by the ANC, but instead originated from Afrikaans business circles in the 1980s. Now, the concept was designed by a white Afrikaans businessman meant as a corporate self-preservation strategy, not as a form of radical reform, and over time has been co-opted by the ANC, who has morphed it into today's highly politicized system. Many critics argue that the modern BEE system fosters cronyism, inefficiencies, and economic exclusion, deviating from its original pragmatic intent. But you see, that pragmatic intent, what was the foundation of BEE, is actually now really important, because as BEE is being investigated more, what we see is many individuals say, well, let's go back to the original intention of it, because we can see that it has somehow been perverted. And so only we apply it in a more reasonable and pragmatic way in the future, we'll get better results. But you see, here's the problem. It was never created to transform or enrich lives. It was a way for white Afrikaners who were in systems of privilege to somehow retain control over their entities when the government changed. Because according to this article, what we effectively saw is many businessmen were keen to give away sections of their business in exchange for protection from the state when the political system changed at the end of apartheid. Now, that was the original founding idea behind BEE. So when the ANC suggests that it was all for transformation and not to entrench an elite capture, well, that is untrue, because the system is doing now exactly what it was always designed to do. It was designed to foster cronyism, and in terms of fostering that cronyism, to then have those cronies protect the very entities who gave them ins. But it has been coerced now to even exclude the very people who wanted their protection. Why this is important is because everybody's starting to see BEE for what it is, an impediment to the economy and the primary lever for state decay. And as the ANC buckles down and says, well, it's all for transformation and enrichment of the previously disadvantaged, the more we look into it, the more we understand that to not be true. BEE is one of the most fundamental principles that caused state decay in South Africa. And the only individuals who are looking to keep it are the very individuals who benefited from it. As I've said numerous times, you will never get chickens to vote for KFC. At least that's my opinions. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. And until tomorrow, bye.